So, dear Thay, dear brother, sister, dear community, and dear everybody, I think we're not limited to the Deer Park Monastery, but we have a lot of people online, so I say hello to you too. Today is Sunday, November 15, 2020, and we are at the Ocean of Peace Meditation Hall in the Deer Park Monastery in Escondido, California. And this is the second week of our 3-month winter retreat. And I think this is special for me because I rarely spend a lot of time at the Deer Park Monastery. I'm originally from Blue Cliff Monastery. But since different condition, I'm now practicing with you at Deer Park Monastery for 3-month winter retreat. And originally, there were a set of Dharma talk planned for this winter retreat. And I choose this Sunday, basically because my birthday is coming tomorrow. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to say something and to have gratitude for my father and my mother for bringing life to me, and also for our teacher for bringing spiritual life to me. And of course for all the brother and sister monastic as well, lay friend, for nurturing me and nursing me and bring me back to spiritual adulthood so I can get the chance to share the Dharma with you today. So that's a good gratitude to do that, to everybody who helped me with my monastic life. This winter retreat, we have several topics we set up for to share with you, and Brother Stream has already started last Sunday with the ethical foundation, and this is suggest that I share with you today about moral courage, and I think I'm going to use the whiteboard. So Thay Pháp Không has shared a wonderful talk on about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he mentioned the very important thing for us is to practice deeply, so we can be truly in the present moment, and also to stay calm and to be stable, so that we can see things clearly and we know what to do and not what to do. And I think that's the basic of our practice, to be conscious, mindful of every breath, and to be constant and mindful of every step. So I think I will capitalize on that. I will use it to be truly present, to be calm, stable, and to have a clarity. And during this talk, I will alternate a lot between the historical dimension and the ultimate dimension. We live in the historical dimension, When you and me are different, there's the past, there's the present, there's the future, they're all different. And when we talk about moral courage, we talk a lot about the historical dimension. But we should strive to go to the ultimate dimension when everything is interconnected, everything intertwined together. So from time to time, if I go back and forth, don't be confused. Last week, Brother Stream had shared with you about the practice of what we call the three main practice of mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And he shared about the concentration on impermanence and concentration on no self. And we practice so we can get the insight. And the insight helps to liberate us, to have a new perspective. So I thought about, I'm going to share today about the moral courage. But then I thought about it, how do we get the moral? We have the courage to speak out something, but are you sure? Can you see enough of that clarity? So when you talk about some injustice, about some unjust situation, are we really see things from a clear perspective? And that's why I added also the moral compass and also changing perspective in order to have a clear view. So here we have a set of moral, we mean a set of value. And usually we have a divided line. So this would be the good one, the right view. And what is the bad one, the not so good, and the wrong view. And we can say this is beneficial, and this is non-beneficial. But then, beneficial to what? To whom? I think this is important to ask the question. And sometimes we can say, well, this is the law to obey, and this is illegal. So I would share with you about my personal experience. In 1975, I jumped a boat and came to the US as a refugee. Political refugee, maybe religious refugee, and I remember that time I stayed in the camp in Guam Island. And I already have a sponsored paper to go to France to study, because many of my elder brother, sister already study in France and Switzerland. And I stayed for about a month applying for asylum and to come to either France and Switzerland and the US. And at that time, the French took a while to review my case. Same thing with Switzerland. And meanwhile, in the US, because our involvement with Vietnam has a very good program to invite as many refugees to the US as possible. And I thought about it when I study in middle school, we talk about the US. And basically, the textbook talk about the melting pot, about the land of immigrant. So except the native Indians, everybody come immigrant. So I thought for a while, I say, well, if I come to France and I settle and become citizen, maybe some French people sometimes come to me later and they say, well, you don't look like Gaulois, you don't look like French to me. Or if I come to Germany and you say, well, you look like German to me. But if I come to the US, it's the land of immigrant, and if somebody say, well, you don't look like American. Well, see, what are you talking about? Who are the American? All your ancestors come from overseas somewhere. So except the native Indian, nobody has a right to say it at this kind of thing. So based on that premises, this is why I chose to come to the US. And as soon as I come to Philadelphia the next year, in 1976, I stay in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the Declaration of Independence. And there were big celebration all year round, starting March, April, about the bicentennial celebration of the Declaration of Independence. So of course I get the free material, I read, and in those days, we have here the good guys, really the founders. So of course, people like Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Adam, father, son, Hancock put a signature. And in those days, when they declare independence, it was the bedside with the British king. Taxation. Boston Tea Party, whatever that thing is. So young Thomas Jefferson is a brilliant lawyer, was assigned to write the Declaration of Independence. And later on, he helped to write the Constitution as well. So basically, he would say, when the long string of oppression, of injustice, it's about time, let us get together and declare our independence from the British Empire. So in those days, those are the evil ones, the taxation, the British king. And these are the good guys. But as I further my education, reading furthermore, I think we have a couple retreats in Wang Yin Monastery in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and in D.C. So we went to D.C., Washington, D.C. And in our free day, I take our monastic brother and sister to come to visit Mount Vernon, which is the the house of the first president of the US, George Washington. And when I came to his house, I was totally surprised. This is the whole plantation. And when you open reading material, housing, he has 500 slaves. And he have a whole organization, foreman, people to run the organization for him. And of course, his family benefit from all those wealth and so on. Of course, he was a general. He was respected. He fought against the revolution, against the British. If they have lost the war, probably he'd be imprisoned or executed. But then the next year, we went to Monticello, which is the residence of Thomas Jefferson, the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence. And again, I found out, wow, he has a couple of hundred slaves as well. And I didn't go to Harvard and I didn't go to Adam, but I'm sure they have some slaves too. So what I would find out that in those days, those are people who make the Declaration of Independence, and they all have slaves. So it's like you go to California and you don't have a car. How many people in California don't have a car? In those days, you need to have a car to drive around, to buy things, to get a job, to do something. So in those days, even in the northern of the US, which is not the south, in those days, everybody seemed to have slaves, have some plantation, some property, when the slave was working for them to help them to run their residence. So to me, now we see something about the shifting ground here. So actually, the people I really idolize, actually, they are a little bit on this side. And the good guys seem to be the slave, the native Indian. Because I know quite well, I live in Philadelphia, there was a place they call Penn's Landing. And they say this is where Penn land. And he negotiated with the Indian to have a state of Pennsylvania. And guess what? The state of Pennsylvania is the King of England owned some debt to William Penn's fathers in England. So as the payment for the debt that the king incurred, he said to William Penn's father, and father, I will donate you the land in Pennsylvania. Go get your land. But then for thousands of years, the native Indian, the native American were living right there. So what somebody do is take the property of somebody else and give it to somebody else. And of course, there was a negotiation. The history book talk about a peaceful negotiation, but I think it's not so peaceful after a few hundred years. So to me, from 1643 until 1776, and furthermore, of course, the whole time, the settler was on this side. They came to this land. They slowly bamboozle, take the property, take the land from the native Indian. And then there's a lot of hard work. So they bring the slave. I think in the early days, they call indentured labor or forced labor. And in the early days, there were some white people who had some debt incurred, and they were brought in as indentured labor. But then after a while, after a few, it would change, and the institution, the idea of racism, started to take effect. And after a while, there's no more white indentured labor. They're just black slave. And to me, this thing was never taught to me in high school in Vietnam. I think even when I go to college in the US, it rarely talk about this kind of thing. And to me, this is something that we need to speak out. Of course, we start to know it, but believe me, there are some people in the US who still don't want to talk about it, who still don't want to acknowledge this. And this is worth to speak out about this kind of thing. And I can go on and on, but basically, the building of the US of America, it built upon the foundation of the institution of slavery and of the expulsion, extermination of the native Indian. We live in Pennsylvania, we live in New York. How many Indians are left? How many Native Americans are left? There are very few in some reservation because they've been pushed out into reservation. They're pushed out to the west. And the list can go on and on. If I go, because for the sake of time, I won't go more into details. And of course, we do have a civil war between 1861 and 1865. And of course, there are 11 states that want to go into secession. Basically, they will talk about the Emancipation Proclamation of Freedom. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1960, and he's about to declare the emancipation. So those 11 states decide to secede. And of course, in this side, we call the union. You want to stay together. And the whole reason is because they want to continue to maintain the institution of slavery. The state up here want to abolish slavery, and they were against. Then we have a war. Of course, there was some change. They would say about the lost cause or something like that. But I invite you to listen to the documentary by Ken Burns, The Civil War. And I think I remember some general from the West Point also mentioned the three reasons for the Civil War in the US are slavery, slavery, and slavery. There were no other cause except that. Or if there is any cause, they are secondary. So to me, this is something that we need to bring out in the open. And we need to have a dialogue, and we need to talk about it. Because otherwise, it's not going to change. And everything is now to the point of systemic oppression, systemic discrimination, and institutionalized racism, discrimination. And this is something we need to talk. So we thought that the Union won in 1965. And the other side surrendered. And we have reconstruction period between 1865 and 1877. That's 12 years. And after that, the people in the North say, okay, you recover enough, so we go back to our state. But then they are re-institutionalized another form of oppression. Sometimes we have different, we call Jim Crow law or reestablishment, and it's whitewashing that maybe the Civil War is a different kind of idealism, thing like that. But I was at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, which is the site of the Lorraine Motel, and that's where Martin Luther King got assassinated, for Speak Out for Civil Rights. So this has been going on and on and on. Even I think last year we saw something about lynching, and nobody talked about it. How can that be in 2019 that we still have lynching in the US and nobody talk about it? To me, it means that this still been going on. And we need to have a dialogue. We need to have education. So to have more courage to speak, we need to see clearly what's happening. And the view can change, just like my perspective. In those days, I think there's a lot of good for May the founder. I read many wonderful material. Thomas Jefferson was inspired by John Locke, David Hume, and a lot of others about the Enlightenment age that started in Europe, and many ideas were brought to the US. So that's because the Constitution was very well written, the separation of power between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary side. All these are very good ideas. But it's kind of hard to ask Californian not to own a car. And to give credit, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, I think before their death, they bequeathed, let's say, that they want to free all the slaves. But the time was not ready for them to free the slave. And those things happen. So what I want to share with you also, we have what we call a group moral. A group ethic. So we need to be very careful about how we can enclose ourselves within the group. And we set our own ethics, and we set our own moral, and ignore the rest of the people. And these things happen. The settler, the slave owner, love their family, love their children, take good care of their children, give them good education. They have wonderful tea party, they want everything else. But then everything else beside doesn't matter. I believe in Germany, during the Nazi era, we have a concentration camp where people gas and be in prison and die. And the town next to that, the prison guard will party, their wife, their children were well treated. So they have their own moral, their own ethics. But anything is outside that circle doesn't count. So when somebody starts to call people names, the minority or something like that, that is a warning sign that we need to speak out. We need to treat people with dignity, even though they are outside of our circle, outside of our group. I believe during the Second World War, the Japanese has very good moral conduct among the troops. They care for each other. They sacrifice themselves for each other. But within the group, as long within the group, but outside the group, it doesn't matter whether they kill people, because that not belong to the group. Everything they bring, the captain bring native women as prostitute for entertaining the soldier of the group to maintain the morale of the soldier. It doesn't matter whether she won or not, and they will kill, they will rape her, they can do anything they want because the people are outside of the group. So to me, when we practice, we need to expand the ethic, the moral of the group. And it can happen to any set situation. We are a group of Blue Cliff Monastery monks. We come and we are very tight together. So I'm drink tea, I play with them, but I'm very aware that I have some impartial view about things. I don't lose myself into the group. Actually, I never belonged to any group, really. I was blessed in what I have encountered many cultures. So I lived for 20 years in Vietnam, but I don't think I'm fully Vietnamese. I live for 41 years in the US now. I think I was here a lot longer than many of you were born. Yet I don't consider myself American. And I speak French fluently. I know French culture very well, but I don't consider myself French either. I understand the culture, I understand the language, I understand the soul of the culture, but I remain impartial. That doesn't mean I reject, but I embrace it, but I pick the best of each culture and use for my betterment rather than be restricted within the confinement of those circles. So we talk about the three poisons. Greed, hatred, and along with that, discrimination. And ignorance. Or I would add that justification. And this is, I add, no, not working. So for the settler who came, when you first came to the country, the weather was harsh. We live in Deer Park Monastery. Sometimes the weather is very, very harsh. If you don't have amenity, you don't have heating, cooling system, you have to work hard to survive. And many of the settlers found it easy to bring slaves and have them work for you. And generation after generation, 100 years, it becomes subconscious, institutionalized of dependency on slavery. So there are a greed going on. It's never enough, we want more. And then because the people are outside of the group moral, of the group ethics, it's easy to hate them. It's easy to demean them. I think even Thomas Jefferson, he wrote a lot of good things, I know, but I think there was a few comments. He probably talked to another white folks. And what he was saying is, I have some doubt that really the black race can really have the same intellectuality the way the white folks. And of course, because we've been badly treating the black slave since 1643 until now. We don't allow their children to have education. We don't allow their housing and so on. So how they can get, and there were some illustrious black intellectuals who bought their freedom and proved that it is possible to do this kind of thing. But it's easy to justify it. It's easy to say and to discriminate it. So I did some research and I found something very interesting. Racism and discrimination is pretty much a new thing. Before 1508, in the English language, there's no word for race. People didn't have a concept about this kind of thing. So race is very a modern idea. Of course, when you try to bring somebody and you say, well, you have to work for me, and I'm privileged, I don't have to work, you work for me. So over a few hundred years, people develop different theory. So the race difference has no genetic basis. Within the DNA, we all have the same. And of course, the skin color is only skin deep. We all have the same blood, everything else. And most of the variation within the genetics are within the race, not between the races. And slavery predates the race. In the past, when two countries fought each other, and whoever won that war, they will bring the vanquished to be their slave. So they're all white, they're all Greek, they're all Egyptian, they're all Israeli, whoever lost the war. And of course, if they revolt and they fought the war, they win over, they will take the vanquished to be their slave. So there's no justification to hold a certain population with the darker skin to be the inferior race and racism. So scientifically, historically, it can be proven. So to me, this kind of talk about it, I think we need somebody to speak out about it. And Martin Luther King did talk about it. They bring them up to what we call Birmingham jail letter that Martin Luther King wrote on April 16, 1963. So the situation in Birmingham, there was a lot of violence, a lot of oppression, killing of the black population, black people. And Martin Luther King was the president of Southern Christian Leadership Council, which is the agglomeration about 800 churches all around the country. About the white clergymen, they were saying that, well, this was the law of the country. So we need to be careful not to push the envelope. We need to work peacefully to help gradual reform, somehow to bring the betterment to the black people. On the other side, there was a National Islam, Elijah Muhammad, would encourage violence action. And Martin Luther King was very much agreeing with the idea of nonviolent struggle by Mahatma Gandhi. So he caught in between the two sides, wanted to do nothing or to be violent. So he opted to have what we call a peaceful demonstration, to have a nonviolent struggle. He and many of the friends come and demonstrated. Do things that normally would be considered illegal, and they willingly get themselves arrested. Things like people go on the front of the bus. The colored people are not allowed to go in front of the bus. The colored people will come to the cafeteria to the restaurant, and they were beaten, they were dragged out because many institutions are for white only, even the restroom, the hotel. So at some point, you have to break the law. So this is a just law. But there are some laws that are unjust. And sometimes people with Martin Luther King would willingly take action to point out the unjustfulness of the law. So he got arrested and he was in jail, and many people would criticize him. You are the president of SCLC. How come you encourage people to get arrested and get in prison? So he wrote the letter to explain his situation. And we can get the copy, you can get easily on the internet for that. And basically what he would call upon the white Christian, the white allies, to really see the situation that we are forced to do. And he didn't do anything violent at all. They were demonstrated. And they willingly become arrested to point out the injustice of the law. And encourage people to speak out more, to help. And indeed, throughout the civil rights movement, there were a lot of white folks who come and help, walk by side or sit side by side. Some of them get killed because of they speak out of that. So this is the content of the letter. To speak out by injustice, violence to the black people. We have a nonviolent protest, willingly to be arrested, and call upon the white religious leadership to help, to be witness, and to be white allies. And there are many other cases, many other situations like that. I just point out to one case when he wrote that letter, the Birmingham jail letter, to all the clergymen or religious friends who can help us. And I think to me, sometimes we can stay silent, but sometimes it's difficult. I remember Thay was saying that the monks sometimes stay in the temple and chant the Heart Sutra, chant the sutra. But then when bombs were dropping all around the temple, we cannot stay forever chanting the sutra. We have to go out and help people. And sometimes this kind of situation happened. Even in Hue, about a month ago, there was a heavy flood, and our monks and nuns from the root temple come out and help people, to bring them food, to bring them some water, at least until the water receded. And that's a good thing to do. So sometimes when we see the situation injustice, you have to speak out. And it has been a challenging situation for the last 4 years. Hopefully things get better, I'm not sure, but I think to me there are certain things that need to be said, because sometimes we don't have a lot of leaders who help to bring civility, to bring decency. And when somebody don't do it, I think it's very important to speak out. I won't call name, but to me, what is decency and what is not decency? We Americans, I think we know what it is. And I point out a few things. What is not decency? make joke of physically, mentally challenged person. It's hard enough for people who has the ability, and to make joke with them, that's not decent. To belittle falling or dead prisoner, soldier, that's not decency. And to say in front of the parents of the dead soldier, that's not decent. To dehumanize, disregard women's dignity, to condone sexual harassment, that's not decency, at least not in front of TV. To demonize immigrant, human refugees. I've been in that situation when I have to come to the US. And the US should remain open to accept more immigrants, especially when they have a valid case. To discriminate people on the basis of ethnic origin, like Hispanic, Mexican, Iranian. We have not done that in the past. So why start it now? To denigrate others so one can praise oneself, one's own ego. Very few people do that. To bully people who don't agree with you. That's not a good behavior of leaders. To use irresponsible word statement which eventually would hurt people. That is not decent. To tell untrue fact in front of the television, in front of the news, that's not decent. To foment, encourage racial group toward more hate and violence. That's not a good behavior of leader. To separate migrant children from their parents, that's not decent. And this happened in the past too. For many years, the US government has the policy of taking the children of native Indian to separate them from their parents and to re-educate them. So they don't know about their culture, they don't know about their language. So they won't be a threat to the domination of the settler, of the people. And it has been hidden for many, many years. But now it's time to speak out about this kind of thing. To me, that's very important to, and we need to use truthful language. Sometimes loving language, but sometimes it needs to be direct language to point out the situation. And I look into the thing about that greed thing, because that greed thing drives a lot of motivation. And when you're greedy is never enough. You want more and more and more. And sometimes to explain the three poisons of greed head, I found that there must be something else that motivated people to be greedy. So I started to look into that, and I found something I want to share with you. So here are the greed, the hatred, and the ignorance, which I won't go into detail, but we already studied Buddhism, we know about it. I come upon what we call the 5 basic desires or 5 basic needs of all living beings. And I've tested many times. When I went to India, I went to Hawaii, I tested out. And this is more or less, Thay was talking about it, but in separate Dharma talk. And it takes a little while to gather all those things in one setting. So basically is we all have a need, the desire to survive and to live. And we do anything to survive and to live. And of course, when you can take it to the more accentuated version. For the last 2 or 3 weeks, we, the Blue Cliff Monastery monk, we've been coming here with one small piece of luggage, and we'll be going around the hamlet here looking for, I didn't bring the hooded jacket, and I didn't realize it was so cold in the morning, so we'll be going around the closet looking for something. I didn't bring enough socks, and so we accumulate things that we think that is help our comfort, our safety. But then you can take it further to have a second residence, have a large house in a plantation, if you have a slave to work for you. So it's very easy to do this kind of thing. The second thing is a desire to procreate and to continue. And this has been a really strong driving force motivation. A lot of people, I have a lot of friends, we have many young folks that come, but after a while, I think some of them don't come enough because it's time for them to find a mate. It's time for them to date and find out a possible mate so they can marry, they can have children. And this is their strong motivation. And of course, the monastic, we have a different way to do it, luckily. And the desire to be loved and to be listened. It seems to be small, but Facebook is one of the biggest corporations in the US. And the whole thing, what they do is to promote the like. People socialize. People need to be listened. They say something, they need to have witness, somebody to listen to them. And that's a very strong motivation. There was somebody who are very rich, and then now they want to be accepted, they want to be respected, they want to be loved. And they spend money to get power, to get influence. I won't name names, but we know who those people are. And the desire to love someone or something. We have a couple retreatants who have a different difficulty relating to people. So he relies on dogs, or she relies on cats. There are some people who have 20 cats in the house. It helps the cats, but I think you need some social skill as well. But the motivation, the desire is very much there. There are some people who bring their dog to the hair salon, to the barber for dog or something. And that is taking a little bit to the extreme. So to me, the greed thing is never stop. You need to put a rein in your impulses, to your habit energy. And with what? With mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And the desire to know or to understand. And that has been since the beginning of humanity. We think we don't understand about the weather and so on. We say there's some God somewhere to do something to do us, the God of wind, the God of war, the God of water, whatever. And luckily we designed some science so we understand more. We developed some philosophy. But the best is to have wisdom. And the three study sometimes is not enough to overcome those basic impulse, the basic desire. So I add to that the 4 immeasurable love. If you work on your loving kindness, if you work on your compassion, you work on altruistic joy, and you embrace and you have equanimity of people, it will help you to open and slowly eliminate this greed. So if we have more freedom to the slave, to the black, to the minority, and we have joy, that's a good thing. If somebody, a people of color, can be vice president of the United States, we rejoice, we have joy. Not sadness, not anger, because somebody like Barack Obama was in the White House. I think it needs to be pointed out. This is the merit system. If you study, if you work, if you campaign, and you work hard, and people trust you, then you should have opportunity. So I've been voting for 38 years, ever since I become a citizen. Every election. I think I didn't vote for 2 elections because I was in Plumberlage as a novice monk. And the monk asked me, I have to stop worrying about the world and just go to my monastic life. In those days, the very slow internet, you don't have that kind, so I couldn't vote. But as soon as I come back to the US in Vermont, I vote at every election. It's not a privilege, it's my duty as a citizen. And I will instill that to every voting citizen in the US to vote at every election. Regardless, there's nothing to vote, you still vote. Because when you voted, you have to inform yourself. You have to read, you have to understand what is at stake, and you have to contribute. And if something doesn't go your way, at least you have a clear conscience. You did what you're supposed to do. So for all the 38 years I've been voting, and I look around the color of the state. And it varies from year to year. When Carter was elected, when Obama was elected, when Clinton were elected, when George Bush Sr. or George Bush, it all stayed the same. So those are the blue states, and those are the red states. And just the recent map of 2020 is like that. There was some time when the red state were here, but for this election is here. And what is this map tell you? There were 11 states that voted for secession during the Civil War. Okay? The South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, and later Missouri, Kentucky joined. It's all there. And year after year, it's still there. And we send people to the moon. We go to the depth of the ocean. We have alternative energy, we have all kinds of things, but the human mind doesn't change. We have what we call the unconscious, institutionalized discrimination. So we have a lot of work to do. But I think to me, at least from my part, I think we need to talk about it. And the nice thing I see, I was in Blue Cliff monastery for 13 years. And the first 11 years, I thought I know everything about Blue Cliff because I was there from the beginning. And then 2 years ago, there was a lay friend. He brought a drone, and he put it up in the air. It will fly high above the meditation hall, and it started to take picture and take a video clip. And I thought, wow, it's so beautiful. I never see such a beauty like that. That's because I was on the ground level. I never see the bird's eye view. So when you look at different things like this, you have to hover above ground level of the local conflict of this election to see very clearly from the historian point of view what is happening. Because when I see it, I say, wow, the bird was seeing that the whole time for 13 years and they didn't tell me. Actually, they were speaking to me, but in their bird language, I didn't listen. So to me, it's very important to have a different change of perspective, to see from a different angle point of view, to have a better, I wouldn't say to the right view, because next week, Sister Hương Yim will talk about right view, so I'll just say clearer view. At least you can point out in the right direction and help people to have a transformation of a collective consciousness. There's a lot of things I want to say, but I think I want to limit myself because it's past maybe 7 minutes already. So thank you very much for listening. And I apologize in case what I say may be strong word and might hurt some other people. But the topic is the moral courage to speak out. So that's my opportunity to speak out. Thank you very much.